Good afternoon. I know we had at least I had a lot of fun this morning with y'all over in the Culinary Arts Building. I was blown away by the creativity that I saw. And for those of y'all who are joining us virtually, this morning, the in-person attendees were separated into rooms. Each room had a different access point to food. So we had some folks who had a farm box that we got from the CSA. We had some folks who had ingredients that could be found at a corner store, a bodega, or a dollar store. We had some folks who utilized WIC-approved ingredients. We had some folks who had a food bank box. We also had some folks who had limited equipment, so either they only had one induction burner with one pot or a microwave. All of the attendees were working in groups to prepare one serving of a dish utilizing whatever ingredients and equipment they were given. As well as we had some time constraints. We didn't give y'all a lot of time to plan, cook, serve, and enjoy that food. We only had 75 minutes. So a lot of these challenges are the reality for us, for our patients, and for our patrons. We wanted to put into practice what we have been talking about for the last 2 days, or for some of us for 10 years or more. Put those skills into practice of what we're actually asking of ourselves and our patients when we ask them to cook more at home. The time constraints that are involved in that, the access points that are involved with that, the cost of that, as well as the nutrition implications. So, with that, we had some judges going around to the different rooms, checking in with what you were doing. We also talked to your chefs within those rooms who got to taste a lot of that food to come up with some winners of the day. And thanks to Mercer, I have some prizes to give away for our top 2 teams at the conference. And I gotta say, y'all made it so hard. You made it really, really challenging for us to decide because there was so much creativity that was implemented throughout. But I think that these top winners really embodied the challenge of utilizing the ingredients you were given as well as the methods. So the first team winner that was in our in the second session, they were in a limited equipment room, and it was the poached fish puttanesca. So can I have the folks who'd made that come on up here? Can I say something? Yes, please do. Yeah. So I have some goodies to share, and Dr. Tech, I'm going to ask you to take a seat. And the other folks who prepared that, we do have some goodies for them. Thank you, such good job. All right, and our second runner-up, I guess, or first runner-up for the all-around winning dish was the striped bass primavera from the Farm Box Challenge. And then I'm also going to ask one representative from each of the teams. We had your chefs in your room pick a winner from their room. I'm going to ask one representative from the winning team to come and take a seat, if you're comfortable, to share a little bit about the experience. So come on for striped bass primavera. Thank you so much. Do you want to sit on stage and share a little bit?
Do you want to talk about it?
Thank you.
Linda, do you want to talk about it?
Oh, here it is. You follow me. Awesome job. Our top two teams. Thank you so much. And if I can have one representative from our food bank room who made the apple pancakes join the stage. If I can have one representative from the WIC room who made the kung pao dish join the stage. And if I can have one representative who was in the Bodega room who made the sweet potato shrimp curry with polenta join the stage. Again, we have 5 individuals sitting up here who prepared some amazing food, but there were so many great choices. I was blown away by the creativity, from brown rice congee that I saw in the limited equipment room, the potato and cabbage wax bean hash that was in the food bank room, the Niçoise salad that was in the WIC room, and the toast points from the Bodega box. I also saw a beautiful appetizer. I told the group that I don't think I've ever seen packaged sliced cheese look so elegant, with some beautiful shrimp on top. And we even had one group implement some poaching skills and poach shrimp in a microwave today. So much creativity all around. Round of applause to all of y'all. You really embraced the challenge all around, and we give you so much credit. I knew it was going to be some controlled chaos going in, but you all rose to the challenge. So with that, we have on our panel those individuals who participated. We also have some of our experts in this field who were serving as and Chef Juicy.
Hi, my name is Dan Giusti. I'm a chef. I have a company called Brigade that places professional chefs into institutional kitchens, like in school food programs, prisons, and senior centers.
And Chef Camp.
If you don't know me by now, I'm Chef Camp. I'm a registered dietitian, nutritionist, and I work for the American College of Culinary Medicine.
So starting with our participants, I would love to hear from each of y'all how you came up with your concept with your team, and then if you realized what concessions you were going to have to make based on the ingredients that were allowed, as well as the nutrition parameters. Does anybody want to share how they came up with their concept?
I can start. I think some of it was, and I'm trying to scan the audience for my team members. So we initially were sort of going through even just what we all like to eat, and had some that didn't eat meat, some that didn't eat shrimp, and so we sort of settled on wanting to do something with the fish, but knowing that we had limited equipment. I think maybe you don't naturally gravitate toward fish, but we thought it would be a good protein, and thought about how we could make a sauce. And I'll give a shout out to my lesson from yesterday on poaching. So I think I had poaching in my head, but was also a really nice way to make like a healthy, flavorful meal in one pot with not a lot of equipment.
And can you share what room again?
Oh
you
yeah,
were in?
the limited equipment room. So we had our like one induction burner. We wanted to do a pasta dish, so we sort of had to make the pasta and assemble the sauce, and then once the pasta was done, we could heat the sauce and poach the fish. So it was a little time management, but it all worked out with our tiny equipment. Oh, and we did have delicious mixed veggies that we defrosted in a microwave. So all the time I tell my patients that frozen vegetables can still be really good and tasty. Now I'll maybe tell them to chop it up in a tomato sauce to make them more flavorful.
Wonderful. Anybody else want to share their how they came up with their concepts and how they might have had to change that based on what was available?
I was in the farm box room, and so everybody had well, it wasn't mise en place. It was the whole food. So we had some fresh noodles and several different kinds of greens. Kohlrabi, which was, I knew what it was, but never tasted it before. But fortunately, one of my team members knew exactly what to do with that, and that it needed to be pickled or cooked for a long time. So we were like, let's get this started right away. One of my other team members has excellent prep and cooking performance skills. So that sea bass was beautifully pan-seared, and that is all Rachel. I don't see her right now, but you did a fantastic job with that. I don't want to take credit for it, but I kind of looked at this tray and was like, this looks like primavera to me, because there are all these vegetables and cheese and milk and noodles, and it's like, if anybody has a better idea. So it's sort of a collaborative, definitely collaborative effort, but everybody, I think, played to their strengths really well. So lots of great knife skills, lots of great cooking skills. And it was a lot of fun. It was fast, right? So it was like, oh, we don't have that much time, so what can we do that's quick?
Wonderful. And, you know, I think that sometimes we don't necessarily think of a farm box as being a challenge to access food, but oftentimes it's about the knowledge base of how to utilize the ingredients that you're provided with, because oftentimes in a farm box, you're getting new ingredients that you don't necessarily find at your local grocery store. So being able to collaborate with that knowledge base or stick with something that feels a little familiar, like a primavera, and incorporate those new ingredients can be a great way to be a little more accessible for some of those more unique style ingredients. What did you think of the kohlrabi for the first time trying it?
Well, like I said, I've seen it before, and the leaves look kind of like Swiss chard leaves. The taste of it is in that root vegetable, kind of more assertive and a little bit drier than jicama. Again, if Linda hadn't known what to do with that, I didn't know what to do with that. So again, great ideas.
And then would the folks who made the Bodega box, would you like to share?
Sure. So this started off with my sister and I, both of whom have a gluten intolerance, so there was that. And then while I was figuring that out and we were looking at what was available, people snatched up everything. We're like, oh no, there's like not much left. So I grabbed some shrimp and looked at the spices. So the spices available included turmeric and coriander and cumin and cayenne. I was like, wow, we can make a curry with that. So our other person, Cynthia, wherever you are out there, was amazing because she kept us all on track. And so we were doing measurements. And so I had to go and borrow some yam from one group and borrow some pineapple from another group. And before you knew it, we had this polenta base and this spicy shrimp curry yam sauce. It was, I would have used other ingredients had I had them, like some onion and garlic and some bell pepper, but that wasn't available, so we used what we had.
Wonderful. And then for the WIC team, you made that kung pao dish. Will you talk a little bit about how you got there? With your concept?
So I was in the WIC box challenge room with my 3 other lovely teammates, and we were so fortunate to have Miss Veronica Oates on our team because she envisioned a peanut sauce, and she and I were excited about an Asian-style peanut sauce. So we got garbanzo beans, spiced it with a little bit of chili powder and paprika to get it a little kick. And then it was roasted in the oven along with some other vegetables. We did a bed of sauteed spinach, mushrooms, garlic, and onions. And then had roasted carrots as well as sweet potatoes in a diced portion on top. Did lentils as kind of like another crunch, or kind of a almost to mimic a sesame, or excuse me, sunflower seed, and then had sesame seed on top as well. And then we had drizzled some peanut sauce on top for our dressing. The interesting thing is, unfortunately, we didn't have soy sauce. So Miss Veronica was ingenious and used olive juice to make our peanut sauce. And we put olive juice, some red wine vinegar, ginger, and garlic, as well as an oil to make a lovely peanut sauce that we're still snacking on this afternoon, and just under 550 calories.
Wonderful. Yeah, that I think that pivot to still provide that umami that you got from utilizing that briny liquid in place of that soy sauce was really a wonderful, ingenious idea. And then last but certainly not least, our food bank box. I had some of those apple pancakes and I ate what was left because it was so delicious. Will you tell us a little bit about how you created that concept and what you made for us?
Yeah, so with the ingredients that we were obviously provided with the oats as well as the evaporated milks and applesauce. So immediately what jumped out to me was breakfast. And so in a way to kind of make that a little bit more creative, I kind of thought about reflecting on my gluten intolerance too. I also do kind of make these like similar oat pancakes too. And so that's kind of what drew the inspiration behind the dish. A way that we did to elevate it is by the use of spices too. So in there you do find some ginger as well as the cardamom, cinnamon, as well as nutmeg that were used to elevate the sweetness a bit too, and also keep it within the parameters as well. So yeah, and I guess it was pretty much a smash hit. I did have to have my team members try it because I wasn't sure if they were gluten-free oats, but so shout out to them to making sure that my trial pancakes actually tasted good, so.
They did. Well, and I think that reference of utilizing those spices that our brain associates with sweet foods, so we have to rely less on adding sugar, and just a little bit of that honey drizzle will go a long way. But our brain sees that as so sweet because of all of those lovely warming spices. For our chefs, Chef Justi and Camp and McDonald, how would you have approached this challenge if you were given the food bank box? Because I think personally the food bank box and the limited equipment are probably the most challenging that are there.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, the contestants, if you will, they did a phenomenal job. I think really people showed off their level of culinary knowledge, level of culinary expertise, but they also highlighted the challenge involved in coming up with a dish on the fly. So that's a challenge that most people, if not everybody, deals with. You know, I don't know about you all, but myself, I don't necessarily come home every day think I'm going to make this. I look in my refrigerator, I look in my cabinets and see what I have. And I'm blessed to have, food available, but even with that availability, it's still a challenge. And what I love about this experience, it really just shows how creativity, with a little bit of creativity, you can make a lot from a little. And I think if that is a message that we could pass on to our communities and also patients, we can really help a lot of people out.
Any other thoughts?
So I wasn't here for the competition, but based on what I heard and what I'm hearing now, everyone did an amazing job. This is the work that I do now as a chef, and we have 60 chefs doing this work every day, trying to figure out how do you make delicious meals that people are going to eat with limited equipment, limited budget, nutritional guidelines, and so on. So hearing all of you do it is awesome. I think it's a great exercise to figure out how you can push the limits. I would say one thing I'm thinking here, because we've actually never had the opportunity to develop, not the opportunity, but we haven't gotten into that space where we're developing recipes or ideas for folks at home who might have limited equipment, limited space, limited time, of course, a budget, and thinking about some of the things that would be important that I would kind of tack on to the, obviously some of the parameters were implemented, meaning the food bank box, you had the food that you had, the limited equipment room, you had limited equipment, but things like allergies, I know like generally I would stay away from a variety of foods, just flat out. Like if I was gonna, like for example, in schools, we don't touch nuts. We just don't even do it. There are certain things that we would never put shellfish on a menu, just because, you know, anything that could be pretty commonly a cause of anaphylaxis, we would stay away from. And then another thing is food safety. I'm always amazed when I go eat at people's homes, and this is, I don't know, this is maybe not a nice thing to say, but I'm always shocked that more people don't get sick at home when they eat. Because it's a little disturbing watching some folks, the way they handle themselves in their home kitchen. And there's definitely a few folks in my family that when I hear that we're going there for a holiday, it makes me a little nervous. But food safety and and putting things into a recipe that you know might not be so difficult to handle, particularly when you have limited space, makes me very nervous. People handling certain proteins when they have very limited space in their kitchen. Where do they store those things? Where do they process those things? How do they ensure that those things are sanitized after the fact? So, but again, I think just hearing some of the creativity in there, it's all about resourcefulness. And it seems like particularly this idea of like not having soy sauce, moving into using like the olive brine to make something a little more kind of savory. It's really cool to hear folks go through that. And I feel like it's one of those experiences that if you go through it once or twice, it's super difficult. And it's just like, it's a practice, like over and over again, figuring out how do you cook in a resourceful way, and you can get really good at it. But it was really exciting to just even hear about it, let alone having tasted it.
Barbara, I know that while we were doing some of the shopping for the skills building, you were coming up with ideas of what you would have, do, how you would approach it.
We had so much fun at the dollar store. Even though Carrie wouldn't let me get the Spam or the Beanie Weenies or the Weenie Beanies. I think there's two things. I think, you know, when I approach cooking very, very much, I come home, well, I am home, but I move from the office to the kitchen, and I say like, oh, dinner. And I like open pantries, open drawers, open the fridge, see what there is. I ask Google sometimes, what do you do with these seemingly unrelated ingredients, and can someone tell me something they did? And I'll be like, oh, that's a kind of good idea, but I got a better one from your idea. And so I'm a big believer that you can use a springboard. And I think asking Siri, how do you use cannellini beans, you know, whatever and whatever together? And then she'll spit out 10 recommendations. I'll say like, okay. And then I'll put my own twist on it. So I think that's something that I urge my room to do. Anyone who's in my room knows I'm not a fan of the microwave, so I need to get over my microwave fear or dislike or whatever. Like I wouldn't have one if I wasn't married. I didn't have one, and I didn't have one until I got married because he came with it. And I was like, you know, I'm a snob. Well, not even a snob. I think it just makes pasty food and weird textures, and, you know, and like I told everyone in my room, it's great for sanitizing your sponges. Do that every night. 1 minute in the microwave. Works great. But seeing that poached fish, that poached shrimp come out of the microwave was like, wow. I mean, it came out beautiful. It was not overcooked. It took 2 minutes. It was beautiful. You know, we made a beautiful poaching. Like I had anything to do with it. They made a beautiful poaching liquid, you know, so they had water with some spices, a teeny bit of a fat in there, just a beautiful poaching liquid. Put the shrimp in, heated it up for 30 seconds, put the shrimp in, covered it with saran wrap so it stayed, the steaming stayed, and it came out beautiful. And that was sort of, for me, like I would never have considered doing that, but for this challenge. And I think for the home cook and for the person who does live sort of either in a hotel or motel or, you know, in a place where the only thing they have is a microwave, it's sort of, you know, it's possible. It can happen. So I think that to me is, something to really take away, that it is really possible. It requires my favorite saying, which is prior planning prevents poor performance. I think it's a really important one. And I think you just have to take a moment to think before succumbing to convenience and convenience products.
Yeah, I think, please.
Yeah, so I think I agree with everything my colleagues here said, but this experience and challenge really demonstrated that there's also room for providing education based upon resources. And when I think about modern cookbooks, okay, so there's not a lot of modern cookbooks that are focused on having limited equipment. Like, how do you apply techniques using a microwave? How do you apply techniques if you're just shopping at a bodega? And I do think for my patient population on the south side of Chicago, like, this is the type of information and experience that's really helpful for a lot of folks because it's realistic. When I look at, I mean, I have tons of cookbooks, probably too many cookbooks. But if I look at my French laundry cookbook and like gave it out to 1,000 patients, like only one person's probably going to use any of those recipes to some degree because they're delicious, but they take too much time. They require a lot of equipment and or ingredients and stuff like that. It's really more so for a foodie as opposed to everyday dinner. What we just did was really a everyday experience for a lot of folks. But I think the challenge for us in culinary medicine, how do you translate what we're doing in culinary medicine to actually everyday people? And I think this was just an excellent example of how to actually do that.
And I think to your point about cookbooks, now most cookbooks start with a whole section at the very beginning on the equipment that you need. And some lay folks might read that and think, I can't make anything in this cookbook because I have a different kind of rolling pin. I don't have the rolling pin that's specified here. So I always try to tell people, rather than look at a recipe, recipes are guidelines, not rule books. And you should not feel like you have to contort yourself to fit a recipe, but make sure that the recipe can work for you, your preferences, and what you have on hand. But doing so requires confidence to make those changes. And that's really what we're talking about, is how to build kitchen confidence, to make the decisions based on what you have available. How, those of y'all who participated in this challenge, as well as our experts, how did you approach that with having the confidence to make those changes or inspire that confidence in others to work with what they have and to be creative?
So I wanted to comment because there was no black pepper in our kitchen. And I kept walking around like, there can't be a whole kitchen without black pepper in it. Like, everybody has black pepper in their kitchen. It's a really basic thing for me. I'm from South Louisiana. I love food. I cook at home. Like, none of those things are particularly scary. I am fortunate to have come and done hands-on teaching kitchen classes in the past, so I also have that edge. But even in the trying to figure out how to, the creativity of the substitution, right? And we're like, well, we don't have black pepper, but we're looking for something peppery. And it's like, well, we have mustard, we have these vinegars, in the not being afraid to experiment. Like, nothing in the kitchen, well, thinking about food safety is always important. There are some things in the kitchen that might harm you, but keeping those things appropriately separated and washing your hands and washing your knives and your cutting boards and all those things, all the other stuff, all of the seasonings and spices, like, you're not going to poison yourself. There were capers in the, on the spice availability, herb availability thing, and capers, I have capers in my refrigerator. So, like, most of the stuff that was on the table, except for the kohlrabi, were things that I use on a regular basis. My partners were really good at coming up with different combinations of things because we didn't have, like I said, we didn't have the pepper. There was like garlic. We didn't have it. Why is there no garlic? But that's because I'm thinking like Cajun Trinity or whatever, which will be garlic, which would be 4. But my point is that, like, oh, these are the things that I'm looking for. Okay, so we don't have that. reach for something or thinking about like, are these flavors warm? Are these flavors sweet? And what does that evoke? And I mean, you can always, we didn't taste it because we also didn't have like tasting spoons or anything like that. But I mean, if you're at home, you can always taste it and see like, do I like the way this tastes? And if I don't, like, don't actually use that or learn for next time. So I think just not being afraid, you're not going to hurt yourself.
I will echo that. I appreciate my group members coming with me on the puttanesca train because a couple had not heard of, were as familiar with puttanesca and weren't sure about the olives and the capers in there, but it's something that I like to use to get a lot of that salt in without adding a lot of actual table salt, and it was something I felt like we could reduce down and get really savory in a short amount of time. And I really appreciate my group being open for that. And I think looking at some of these other, heritage foods and different flavor combinations, maybe outside of your wheelhouse to use those different ingredients is a great way when you are limited in supply. But I also have a busy life and I really hate doing dishes. So I feel like every day is a limited equipment challenge in my life. Like if I can just use a pot and a spoon, I'm happy. So I really embrace this challenge.
Dr. Tucker, I think we needed to put you in another room then.
So I was going to mention for the Wick Box Challenge, it was really interesting because, as I said earlier, we didn't have soy sauce. And we were thinking about, how can we make this peanut sauce to go with a stir fry? And, there were some combinations on our plate that some folks had not tried before. And so trying to get all of us to be happy with where we were moving to reminded me how much it is for me, how it is for me at home. So I have a 5-year-old and an almost 2-year-old, and if it doesn't look pretty on the plate, they're not going to try it. And then if they, don't get involved in the process, they're not going to taste it. So we have a rule at my table that you at least taste each thing once, and if you don't like it, that's fine. So in the making of the peanut sauce in our team today, we all tasted it. And we're like, okay, well, what should we add next? Does this need more acid? Does this need more sweet? Does this need ginger? And I think that really that solidified it for me. I was like, I can take this at home. My families are going to deal with the same thing. They're going to have kids that only want to eat French fries and cheese pizza. But how do I meet them where they're at? How do I bring them along on this journey?
So what I'm hearing, I think some of the confidence to do this at home comes from two sources. Being confident in understanding the technique, so how to poach, how to roast, how to make a peanut sauce, and then a little bit of knowledge, so understanding umami. So having some of these concepts married to technique, I think if you understand techniques, it doesn't matter what ingredients are thrown at you to some degree. Like you can use the techniques, for instance, poaching. If you know how to poach, it doesn't matter if you're poaching a salmon or a sea bass, like you kind of know how to poach. And then it just comes down to flavor. And if you have a little bit of knowledge about flavor combinations, you can actually make some stuff taste pretty good, even if you don't have a recipe. And if you have a little bit of knowledge as far as like, what makes things bitter, what makes things salty, what makes umami, you put it all together, that gives you a lot of freedom in the kitchen, even with limited resources.
I was going to say, I think, to try to prepare delicious foods in general or at home on a budget, a couple of things come to mind. One is knowing how to shop and also having the confidence in thinking that, sometimes if you go and also being open-minded to what's available. So if you go to the supermarket and you have an idea of what you want to purchase and that particular thing happens to be very expensive, then don't make that. Find the thing that's very cheap and something to your liking. And I think obviously that comes with the ability to know how to cook and the versatility. I think knowledge and training obviously is always going to build someone's confidence. But I think for me, what helps build someone's confidence is the idea that things like frozen vegetables, things like using a microwave, things like using dried herbs versus fresh herbs, these types of things, there's nothing wrong with that. And there's a lot of folks who I know in like the culinary world, a lot of folks look down upon these things, but they're delicious, they can be delicious, and being confident to use those things and use them in a way that makes a meal that's very tasty. And also knowing how to kind of intertwine them. Just because you're going to cook one day with frozen vegetables doesn't mean you always need to cook with frozen fruits or vegetables. Maybe you have frozen vegetables and fresh vegetables in the same dish, and being able to be versatile in that way. But I think from a confidence perspective, not looking down on certain techniques or the usage of certain items, because they can be very instrumental in making food delicious, but also very affordable.
Yeah, I think that oftentimes, this is a room full of people who love food, and that's why you're here. But sometimes we can be a little bit snobby. I say that for myself. You can be a little bit snobby of what you like, and being able that we aren't looking down on other foods as less than. They are all really great ways to nourish ourselves and create great tasting foods. And exposing yourself to some of those foods that maybe you don't always buy, reach for it. See what it tastes like. See how you would incorporate that to add that creativity into the kitchen, and better be able to meet people where they are. With that, we know that sometimes we asked y'all to do the nutritional analysis of your dishes. And sometimes, particularly depending on what you have access to or how you drafted that initial concept, when you see the nutrition analysis, you may need to make some concessions. You may need to adapt and adjust. So how did you adjust and rebalance? Or how would you do that in the future based on the dish that you made, knowing the nutrition analysis? For making sure we're getting enough fiber, making sure we're not having an excess amount of sodium, reducing the amount of sugar, any of those techniques.
I'll talk. So we did the shrimp curry, which met all of the criteria, but we were on the low end on the fiber. So we were right at 600 calories. It was a big dish. It would have filled anybody up, I think, if they ate the whole plate. Great protein, over 31 grams. I think everything hit the box except for the fiber, and we only had access to a few items and nothing that was really high fiber because someone else had already grabbed up the beans and the rice or whatever. We had cornmeal, so we made polenta out of that. So if I'd had a option, maybe I would have done brown rice instead, add a little more fiber in there. Other than that, I think it went pretty well.
So I'll sort of speak for the people I was working with and trying to help people achieve the nutrition goals. What I found was that, there's been a lot of talk about how to make something taste delicious, which is it's primary. And then, okay, this is going to be delicious, but is it going to meet our goals? And we usually don't cook at home with a pen and paper and making sure we're going to hit 500 milligrams of sodium, right? And 5 grams of fiber. So it was interesting to have people really look at, oh, wow, okay, this is going to be delicious, but I'm really going to be over in saturated fat, or I'm really going to be over in sodium, and have to reduce right there on the spot. Nobody really cooks like that at home, right? Unless you're writing recipes, unless you're Carrie and writing recipes, or Barbara. And so seeing that and saying, okay, wow, taking out this much cheese really does drop my saturated fat. Taking out this much cheese changes my sodium, right? So really seeing what elements can really make a difference. Although we're not going to cook like that on a daily basis every single time we cook, doing that today was a really good practice to see what it is, what ingredients are really going to change the numbers. And beyond that, there was a question of, I have this and this, but my calories are too high, or my calories are too low. What should I do if my fiber is too low? And I said, well, in reality, we have to think about, what is the number that's most important to you and or your patient, right? We're not always looking at every single thing. And so if your fiber is low in one dish, maybe you'll make it up in another. If sodium is your primary thing, then sodium's your primary thing, and other things might not be as perfect. And remembering all these numbers are guidelines. You're trying your best, but it's not always perfect. But it was interesting to see what things made the biggest impact and where that really mattered to people.
Yeah, oftentimes perfection is the enemy of success. And I used to see all the time with patients, they want to go from 0 to hero overnight, and we set ourselves up for failure when we do that. So that having good, better, or best options based on where we are on that day. And something that was said earlier, that convenience is an important factor here, that oftentimes, especially in the world of nutrition, convenience food can be demonized or looked down upon. But there's a real use for those convenience foods when we're choosing those carefully, when we're pairing those to create better balance in those meals. So with all of those ideas and concepts, after doing this challenge, how are you going to talk to your patients or your patrons when they have different access challenges when it comes to food or different baseline cooking knowledge to keep them confident and prepare food that is both delicious and healthy? What takeaways?
Use spices. Don't be afraid to use them, as they can really make like a dish pop just by having a couple of like key essential spices. Can really help liven the flavors a lot with using very simple ingredients.
I would add also alliums and acids, like if you can get your hands on lemon juice or lemon zest. There was a citrus grinder in the kitchen, which was, bonus. And don't be afraid to, or pick a new one to test and to try. Use garlic, use onions. Can't stress that enough.
I think just to feel empowered to talk to our patients no matter what their circumstances. And, certainly there are families out there experiencing significant food insecurity that needs to be addressed. But I also see clinically, people get a little nervous if they have a family maybe that is, using WIC supply or only shopping at the Bodega and kind of feel like they're at a wall and don't know how to provide as much nutrition counseling. So we can still, talk about what patients have access to, how to make that food delicious and healthy and fit into guidelines without feeling like that's inaccessible to them.
I would say if someone's not sure where to start, think about the flavors they love the most and how they could apply them in different ways. So if you love lemon basil or you love lime cilantro, you don't have to use it always in the same way. If you made this one recipe and that's the one to challenge to take those flavors and add it to, if you usually use it with a grain, could you use it, with a protein and so on. And so that would sort of force you out of a little bit, starting with something you're comfortable with and forcing you into a new food that might use the things that you're familiar with in a new way, and that could be interesting.
What do I say? I'm an OB-GYN, so I've spent decades counseling, especially pregnant women, on their protein intake. And so I've had this conversation day in, day out with my patients. I really tend to make them focus on their protein because most of them are not getting enough. And again, I have the whole conversation of, a grain and a legume is a complete protein. And you don't have to have a piece of meat to get your protein. So that's been my focus for many, many years with my patients.
And those are really cost-conscious options. Those grains, those legumes are oftentimes things you can get in bulk or are included in all of these different access points.
Yeah, I think, the takeaway is you can make food tasty even with limited resources. So if you have canned vegetables, you don't necessarily have to boil the canned vegetables to death with no flavor. There are options available to make them tasty and very cost effective. Same thing with frozen vegetables. I mean, I'm a child of the 80s. I ate frozen vegetables that was like my only vegetables for the first decade of my life. I wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for frozen vegetables. And my mom figured out how to make it work. And I think this challenge really emphasizes that you can do a lot with a little bit of creativity and then a little bit of confidence.
What was your question? We've lost your question down here.
The question was, after doing this challenge, what's kind of the biggest takeaway on how to counsel your patients or your patrons when they have limited resources to prepare this?
Dollar store. other than getting tongue depressors to make projects for third grade, I don't know that I've ever really looked at the dollar store. Like, I've never really walked up and down the aisles because I just went to get the tongue depressors. And I think, Carrie, I don't know if you agree with me, but like, I was impressed with the array of spices,
Oh, yeah.
the prices of, I mean, they were smaller jars, but I don't really want my dry spices. I don't want the like Cisco, you're never going to use it, not in your home lifetime, right? Like, you don't need this much basil. Nobody needs this much basil in their house. This one is perfect. That they were really affordable, that there was fresh, there was frozen, whole cooked peeled shrimp, and they were like $4 for that. I mean, I was like, oh, I didn't realize they had that stuff. They had, really good selection of frozen vegetables. I mean, I'd never been, we're like I said, tongue depressors for a project. I think that there is stuff out there that is affordable, and that reasoning shouldn't be the barrier to eating better, and that you don't have to have every spice known to man at the same time, and that you can take your time to, like, this week I bought some basil, next week I'll buy the oregano, next week I'll get something else. And so it doesn't become this, you must have, like a recipe, right? You do not have to have every single piece of equipment or every single ingredient on that list, and you can still achieve great flavor.
I was thinking about this because I'm the last one. What can I add to the table? So I was thinking about how I'm going to take this back to my institution, where we have no funding for next year, and like many of you, a long wait list, and many events planned ahead. And someone had told me, who runs their culinary program, that they take their med students at the beginning of the year to Goodwill. And I love shopping. So I love estate sale shopping, and I'm planning on doing that, going to Goodwill and seeing if we can get some of those basic kitchen equipment needs for our med students to help build their kitchen.
And one more takeaway. I think this is really a lesson in structural humility and also privilege to some degree. And when we communicate with patients, we are talking to people that may or may not have the same access to knowledge, resources that we have. And if we as healthcare providers want to help them, we have to, one, recognize our own biases and our own privileges to really meet people where they are. And I think going through this experience, really could be very eye-opening to what some of our patients may have to deal with on their everyday lives, especially if you have not had to deal with those challenges, or if you've dealt with those challenges, but they're not necessarily challenges in the present. It's easy to forget how hard things were once upon a time. And I think this kind of brings people down to earth and really just shows that someone else's reality may be a little bit different than yours. But that's okay. You can still help that person navigate their reality, especially having done a challenge like this.
Yeah, and when we're talking about meeting people where they are, we're talking about the kitchen table as it is right now, not as they wish it were, but that we can see what's already on that table, what's already in that pantry, to be able to provide those recommendations with what's available, what they're already eating, not some high-level other version of that. Because we've got to make sure that it fits with the family's preferences, their preferences, and their availability. I want to reiterate something that was said a couple times when it came to the spices, because I think spices can seem very expensive. So oftentimes folks gravitate towards spice blends. And one thing that comes up a lot in culinary medicine classes is that if you're buying the individual spices, maybe a smaller option, or as Barbara mentioned, the dollar store had quite a wide array of spices in smaller portions. You can utilize those spices to create many different blends once you get home, versus purchasing one blend. You're stuck with that flavor profile. And that can create, having the individual spices can foster more of that creativity. Are there any other tools or resources that y'all would utilize for your patients, your patrons, your workers, as we try to implement more confidence?
I was going to say one thing. I know we talked about not preparing, like not needing a recipe. I think it's great to get to a place where you don't need a recipe and you feel very confident to cook without a recipe. But I know as someone who's having folks in kitchens who this is their profession to cook food, they don't feel comfortable cooking. So not a lot of people at home are that comfortable. Some are very comfortable. So I think even just very well-written recipes, and there are books out there that, you know, as was mentioned, like some of these fine dining cookbooks are not the greatest resources for folks at home for a lot of reasons. But there are some cookbooks, and I'd be lying if I could name them offhand right now, but I'm sure you could look it up online very easily, but that have very well-written, easy-to-follow recipes that are good recipes. So many recipes that are written, I mean, if you get to know a lot of chefs, you see that a lot of chefs write a lot of cookbooks, and there's not much testing going on for those recipes. A lot of those recipes are not good recipes, and you would make them, they wouldn't come out, and you'd probably blame yourself for them not coming out, but they're just not good recipes. So I think finding cookbooks that have very well-written recipes that are very clearly written, that can walk someone through who doesn't have a lot of experience, is a way to gain confidence. Because if you follow that recipe and it comes out well, you're excited, and then maybe the next time you make it, you can kind of put your little spin on it if you want to. But I think that's an important resource to help folks move forward.
That's a good point. I mean, it's one of the reasons why recipes are so challenging, because like I actually want to make a recipe that's really good. I like, there's a book called The Flavor Bible.
Love that book.
The Flavor Bible is great, and what the book does, it really just focuses on flavor combinations. And so for people who are not necessarily interested in, you know, reading recipes over and over again, but you may not necessarily have, you know, exposure to all the different flavors out there, because most, who does to some degree, I think that book is really almost like an encyclopedia of flavor combinations that, you know, if you have some ginger, you look in your counter and see what else you have. You can look on a list. It's pretty much just a list of like things that go good with ginger. And you can start picking and choosing. And I think from that, you could carve out a lot of good recipes, even if you don't have resources. So cookbooks, I mean, one, they take up space, they cost a lot of money. So telling everybody to buy, you know, 100 cookbooks is probably not the most cost-efficient thing. But I think that book, combined with understanding some basic techniques, you can do a lot as a home chef.
I was actually going to maybe have Jennifer speak to this a little bit more, but I think having culinary medicine classes virtually gives people an opportunity to have some of that guidance in their space and adapt to their own lived situation.
I'm going to actually highlight Armando, Chef Armando, who teaches some of our virtual classes and has, we just launched another class this week with 30 people are registered in this virtual class. So when we were saying, how do you encourage, you know, your patients, I was like, gosh, I do this in our community classes all the time. And the thing that gets them the most excited about cooking healthy food is making the healthy food in the class and tasting it. And so I'm sitting here racking my brain thinking how, as a practitioner, you know, you can't go home with your patients and cook with them. So I would say finding these classes is really a great idea, but I didn't want to say it. So actually, by finding these classes in your communities, they're just so valuable. I mean, when I see the faces of the patients and the participants in these classes, and they are all making foods they had never thought of making before, using the recipes that we've all made here, they get really excited, and then they tell their friends and they share it. So it really does exponentially grow the number of people who are willing to try new things.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much to our amazing panelists for sharing your experience, sharing your expertise as we participated in this challenge this morning. I hope it gives you some tidbits to think about when you go home, as you talk to your patients and your patrons, or are leading these classes, about what those accessibility challenges may be when it comes to implementing culinary medicine, and how we can pivot and be flexible while still utilizing culinary medicine principles. Thank y'all so much.